Somewhere in a government filing cabinet, there is an actual document that declares a 2,000-year-old Chinese food method dangerous. They banned it. They regulated it. They told an entire generation to throw it out and buy a refrigerator instead. But here is the part they did not put in the filing cabinet. Scientists have spent the last decade quietly proving those ancient methods were not dangerous at all. Some of them are genuinely extraordinary, and a few might be the most important food discoveries of the 21st century. Hi, my name is Mike, and this is Asian Lifestyle. Hacks 1 through 5, the salt and fermentation secrets. Hack number 1. Dry salting vegetables in clay jars. This one is so old it predates written records in China. Farmers would layer sliced vegetables, most often cabbage, radish, or mustard greens, between thick handfuls of coarse salt inside unglazed clay jars. No water added, no vinegar, no heat. The salt pulled moisture directly from the vegetables, creating its own brine from within. The jar was sealed with a cloth and left alone. That was the entire method. Modern food agencies flagged this for decades because uncontrolled fermentation environments were considered unpredictable. Contamination risk, they said. What scientists discovered in the research wave of the 2010s was something different entirely. That natural salt fermentation in clay environments produces a specific population of lactobacillus bacteria so effective at suppressing harmful pathogens that it rivals pharmaceutical-grade preservation in controlled studies. The clay itself was part of the equation. It breathes. It regulates moisture. It is not an accident. It is engineering without a blueprint. Hack number 2. Fermenting cabbage without vinegar. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but this distinction, no vinegar, is actually the entire secret. Modern pickling adds vinegar to speed up the sour flavor. Ancient Chinese fermentation lets the natural sugars in the vegetable produce their own acids slowly over weeks. The result is a living food full of active cultures that modern vinegar pickling kills entirely. Health researchers studying gut microbiome health are now calling slow natural fermentation one of the most important dietary practices for immune function. It is a practice that Chinese farming communities never stopped doing. They just stopped getting credit for it. Hack number 3. Salt curing eggs in ash and clay. You have seen century eggs. That is not what this is. This method, documented in texts from the early Tang dynasty around the 6th century, involved packing raw eggs in a mixture of ash, coarse salt, and just enough clay to bind everything together. The eggs were left from 1 to 3 months depending on the season. The alkaline ash drove chemical changes through the shell, and the salt controlled moisture. The result was a preserved egg with a completely transformed interior. Stable, flavorful, lasting for months without any cold storage. Regulatory bodies in multiple Western countries flagged this method in the 1980s as unsafe because of the ash component. Microbiological studies completed between 2015 and 2020 confirmed that the alkaline environment created by the ash is actually hostile to bacterial growth. It does not promote contamination. It prevents it. Someone owes a lot of Tang dynasty farmers an apology. Hack number 4. Burying salted fish underground. I know what you are thinking. Mike, that sounds insane. Bear with me. In coastal provinces of southern China, especially Fujian and Guangdong, fishermen packed heavily salted fish into sealed ceramic containers and buried them below the frost line in packed earth. The ground maintained a near constant cool temperature regardless of the season above. Combined with the salt concentration inside the vessel, this created a preservation environment that could keep fish stable for up to a year. Modern food safety guidelines required refrigerated storage and largely dismissed burial methods as primitive. Soil science research published in the last decade has re-examined what ancient Chinese coastal communities already knew. Packed earth below a certain depth is a natural temperature regulator with remarkable consistency. Some researchers are now studying it as a passive cooling model for food storage in regions without reliable electricity. Full circle. Hack number 5. Brine pickling garlic in ceramic crocks. Whole garlic cloves are submerged in a heavy brine inside a sealed ceramic crock and stored in a cool, dark corner of the home. Sealed and cool storage help the process. Simple, effective, and according to nutritional scientists who began studying it seriously after 2010, remarkably potent. The slow brine fermentation of garlic produces compounds that are not present in raw or cooked garlic. Allicin transforms during fermentation into a suite of sulfur compounds with documented antimicrobial properties. Chinese families were not pickling garlic just for flavor. They were, perhaps unknowingly, creating a medicinal food product. This is the kind of thing a pharmaceutical company would now try to patent if they could figure out how to put it in a capsule and charge $40 for it. They cannot. You just need a crock and some salt. Hacks 6 through 10. The drying and smoking techniques. Hack number 6. Sun-drying tofu sheets on rooftops. Thin sheets of tofu skin, called yuba in some regions, were laid flat on clean bamboo mats and left on south-facing rooftops to dry in direct sunlight. The combination of ultraviolet exposure and low humidity essentially sterilized the surface, while drawing out moisture to a level where microbial growth became nearly impossible. Modern food processing replaced this practice with industrial dehydrators, and fair enough, they are faster. But recent food science research has revisited ultraviolet exposure in natural drying and found that the solar spectrum produces surface-level antimicrobial effects that electric dehydrators simply cannot replicate. The rooftop was not just a drying rack, it was a solar processing facility. Hack number 7. Smoke curing pork over rice husks. Wood smoke is common in curing traditions around the world. What made certain Chinese regional methods distinct was the specific fuel. Rice husks produce a cooler, denser smoke than hardwood. That smoke carries different phenolic compounds and different antimicrobial signatures. In Hunan and parts of Sichuan, pork was hung above slow-burning rice husk fires for days, sometimes weeks. The resulting product was fundamentally different from wood-smoked meat in ways that food chemists are only now beginning to document. Some of these compounds have shown activity against food spoilage organisms that standard wood smoke does not affect. The fuel choice was not incidental. It was precise. Hack number 8. Air drying mushrooms upside down. This is one that most people get wrong, even when they try to do it correctly. The traditional method specified upside down. Caps facing down, stems pointing up, strung on thin cords and hung in moving air. This orientation matters because it allows moisture to drain from the densest part of the mushroom, while the gills, the most biologically active surface, are exposed to maximum airflow. Modern drying often places mushrooms cap up on racks. Research into dried shiitake quality has found that the traditional inverted method produces a measurably different flavor and nutritional profile. Specifically, higher concentrations of vitamin D, due to the way the gill structure absorbs ultraviolet light during drying. Someone figured that out without a laboratory, somehow. Hack number 9. Hanging citrus peels near smoke. This one is subtle enough that most people would not even notice it happening. In certain southern Chinese households, mandarin and orange peels were not just dried in sunlight. They were hung in proximity to cooking smoke, not directly over flame, just near enough that they absorbed a faint layer of phenolic compounds from the smoke while drying. The resulting dried peel, called chenpi in Cantonese, had preservation properties beyond what sunlight alone would produce. Traditional medicine texts from the Song dynasty documented this specific method. Food chemists studying aged chenpi in the early 2000s found phenolic concentrations they could not fully account for through sun drying alone. The smoke exposure was the variable no one had measured before. Hack number 10. Drying salted fish on bamboo racks in coastal wind. Not just any wind, but coastal wind. There is a reason this practice was specific to coastal regions, and not inland areas. The coastal air carries a faint salinity that supplemented the surface salt on the drying fish, creating a multi-layered preservation environment. Bamboo racks were used rather than metal or wood because bamboo allows airflow beneath the fish as well as above, drying all surfaces simultaneously. Health regulators in several countries raised concerns about open-air drying because of insect exposure and particulate contamination. Traditional practitioners in Fujian never stopped doing it. Food safety researchers who studied traditionally prepared dried fish from these regions found pathogen levels that are shockingly low. The open air was not the problem. It was part of the solution. Hacks 11 through 15, the clay, ash, and earth methods. Hack number 11, sealing food in clay pots with wax. Once food was packed into a ceramic storage vessel, the neck of the pot was sealed with a layer of rendered beeswax or animal fat. This created an airtight barrier that cost almost nothing and required no mechanical equipment. The seal prevented oxygen from reaching the food inside, dramatically slowing oxidation and aerobic bacterial growth. Food regulators in the 20th century required tamper-evident mechanical seals for commercial food storage. What they did not account for was that the wax seal method, combined with the clay vessel environment, created anaerobic conditions that favored preservation rather than spoilage. Fermentation scientists studying traditional Chinese ceramic storage have documented cases where food sealed in this manner remained stable for periods that defy conventional food safety expectations. Hack number 12. Burying eggs in ash and rice husks. Different from the salt and ash curing method, this one was about long-term cold storage without cold. Eggs were nestled individually into containers filled with a mixture of dry wood ash and rice husks, then buried at a depth of roughly 2 feet in shaded ground. The ash absorbed any moisture that the eggs released. The rice husks acted as insulation. The ground maintained temperature. Eggs stored this way have been documented staying viable and consumable for periods exceeding 6 months. A chicken egg. 6 months. No electricity required. I just want to sit with that for a moment. Hack number 13. Storing grain underground in earthen pits. This is perhaps the oldest food storage technology in Chinese history. Archaeological excavations of Yangshao culture sites, dating back over 5,000 years, have uncovered grain storage pits lined with burnt clay and sealed with organic material. The charring of the pit walls created a carbon-rich surface that inhibited mold and insect activity. The depth of the pits regulated temperature and humidity. Ancient Chinese communities built functional equivalents using fire, labor, and a very good understanding of how the earth behaves below the surface. Modern grain storage now relies on controlled atmosphere facilities that cost millions to build and operate. Scientists studying traditional grain storage in rural Henan as recently as 2018 found examples of this method, still in active use, producing grain quality that compared favorably to mechanically stored product. Hack number 14. Coating fruit in clay, slip to slow ripening. A thin slurry of fine clay and water, applied to the surface of fruit and allowed to dry, creates a breathable coating that reduces gas exchange through the skin. Fruit ripens through release and absorption of ethylene gas. Slow that process, and you slow the ripening. Chinese farmers in certain regions use this with pears, persimmons, and citrus long before the science of ethylene was understood. Modern food companies now use proprietary wax and gas control coatings to do almost exactly the same thing. The patent applications are impressive. The clay slip method has been around since at least the Han Dynasty. No patent required. Hack number 15. Using ash water as a natural preservative rinse. Water strained through wood ash becomes alkaline, rich in potassium carbonate, and mildly antimicrobial. Chinese cooks use this liquid, known as lye water in some regional dialects, as a rinse for vegetables and grains before storage. The alkaline wash neutralized surface acids, disrupted the cell membranes of surface bacteria, and extended the viable storage window of fresh produce. Modern food authorities flagged lye water as potentially caustic if improperly prepared. That is accurate. Improperly prepared, it is too alkaline to be safe. But correctly made at the dilutions used in traditional practice, researchers have confirmed antimicrobial efficacy with no detectable harm to food quality. The method required precision. Chinese practitioners built that precision into generations of oral instruction. Hacks 16 through 20, the oil, honey, and fat preservation hacks. Hack number 16, submerging food in rendered lard. Before refrigeration, cooked pork or duck was packed tightly into ceramic jars and covered completely with rendered lard. As the fat cooled and solidified, it formed a seal that blocked oxygen entirely. Without oxygen, aerobic spoilage organisms cannot function. The food inside could remain stable for weeks, sometimes months, at cool room temperature. Modern nutritional guidelines spent decades warning against animal fat consumption, and this method fell out of favor alongside that dietary shift. Now that nutritional science has significantly revised its position on animal fats, researchers examining traditional fat sealing preservation methods have found them to be remarkably effective. The fat was not just flavor, it was the preservation mechanism itself. Hack number 17, preserving vegetables under sesame oil. A thin layer of sesame oil poured over packed vegetables in a ceramic jar served two functions. It sealed the surface against oxygen. Sesame oil, unlike many other culinary oils, contains sesamol and sesamin, natural antioxidants with documented antimicrobial activity. This was not just a flavor addition, it was a chemically active preservation layer. Traditional food preparation texts from the Ming Dynasty describe this practice in detail, though without the biochemical explanation. Modern food scientists who have tested this method found that it extends the stable storage window of fermented vegetables significantly compared to jars without an oil seal. Two chemical compounds in a cooking oil quietly doing the work of a preservative for free. Hack number 18, sealing meat in honey inside ceramic jars. Honey does not spoil. This is a well-documented fact. The combination of low moisture content, hydrogen peroxide production, and very high sugar concentration makes honey one of the most naturally hostile environments for microbial growth ever identified. Chinese preservation practice took this further by packing cooked or cured meat into honey inside sealed ceramic jars. The honey penetrated the meat slowly, creating a dual preservation environment where neither the honey nor the meat provided favorable conditions for spoilage. Archaeologists have found food preserved in honey in ancient Chinese burial sites that dates back over 2,000 years. Some of it was still technically edible. I am not suggesting you test that particular finding at home. The principle holds. Hack number 19, storing herbs suspended in animal fat. Medicinal and culinary herbs, fully dried, were packed into rendered animal fat in sealed ceramic containers. The fat prevented oxygen from reaching the herbs, stopped moisture absorption, and maintained the volatile aromatic compounds that give herbs their medicinal and flavor properties. Herbs stored this way retained potency significantly longer than those stored in open containers or cloth bags. Modern herbalism shifted toward airtight glass jars and freeze-drying. Both are effective, but traditional fat suspension has been found to preserve certain fat-soluble plant compounds better than any dry storage method because the fat itself holds those compounds in solution. The herbs are not just stored in the fat, they are dissolved into it. Hack number 20, using tea-infused oil as a preservative coating. Green tea was steeped in sesame or camellia oil, and the resulting infused oil was used to coat dried meats, fish, and certain preserved vegetables before final storage or wrapping. The catechins in green tea, specifically epigallocatechin gallate, are among the most potent natural antioxidants known to food science. Suspended in oil and applied as a surface coating, they create an antimicrobial and antioxidant barrier that extends storage life measurably. This combination of tea compounds and oil is so effective that modern food science companies have spent considerable money trying to replicate it synthetically. They have largely failed to match the natural version. Traditional Chinese practitioners figured it out by accident or by very careful observation and used it for centuries. Hacks 21 through 25, the fermented liquid and wine techniques. Hack number 21, aging rice wine to preserve meat. Strips of cooked or cured meat submerged in aged rice wine created a dual preservation environment where the alcohol inhibited microbial growth and the acidity of the wine further stabilized the protein structure of the meat. Regional variations of this practice across Zhejiang and Jiangxi provinces have been documented since the Song dynasty. Modern food science calls alcohol-based preservation effective but impractical compared to refrigeration. Yet in a traditional household with no electricity, a jar of aged rice wine and a ceramic crock represented a preservation system of remarkable sophistication. Hack number 22. Using fermented black bean liquid as a brine. The liquid produced by fermenting black beans is not a byproduct. It is a product. Rich in organic acids, salt, and active microbial cultures, this liquid was used by traditional Chinese cooks as a preservation brine for vegetables, fish, and occasionally eggs. The living cultures in the brine actively competed with and suppressed spoilage organisms in whatever was submerged in it. Modern food manufacturing produces sterile brines specifically because living cultures are considered unpredictable in industrial settings. What those industrial settings sacrifice is exactly what made the fermented black bean brine so effective in the first place. Hack number 23. Storing vegetables in rice washing water. The cloudy water left after rinsing raw rice is not dirty water. It contains starch, B vitamins, and a population of naturally occurring beneficial bacteria. In certain Chinese regional traditions, vegetables were submerged in sealed jars of rice washing water and left to ferment slowly. The natural bacterial population initiated a mild fermentation that produced lactic acid, preserving the vegetables while simultaneously increasing their nutritional complexity. Modern fermentation researchers get the most animated about this method because it requires nothing. No salt purchase, no special equipment, no added cultures. Just the water you were going to pour down the sink anyway. It is simple, sustainable, and rooted in traditional practice. Hack number 24. Preserving fish in Shaoxing wine and salt. Shaoxing wine, produced in the city of Shaoxing in Zhejiang province, has been made continuously for over 2,500 years. Its combination of alcohol content, natural acidity, and specific microbial history makes it chemically distinct from other rice wines. When used with the salt as a fish preservation medium, it creates conditions that are broadly hostile to spoilage, while simultaneously breaking down proteins in the fish in ways that deepen flavor over time. The resulting product is not just preserved fish. It is transformed fish, a different ingredient with different culinary properties than the original. Traditional Chinese cooks understood this distinction intuitively. Food scientists are now documenting exactly why it happens at the molecular level. Hack number 25. Using aged vinegar as a long-term food seal. This is the final hack, and possibly the most underestimated. Aged Chinese vinegar, particularly the dark varieties produced in Shanxi province, through a process that can take up to 12 years, is not the same product as standard distilled vinegar. It contains complex organic acids, amino acids, and melanoidin compounds produced during the long aging process. These compounds give it preservation properties that extend beyond its acidity alone. Traditional Chinese practitioners used aged vinegar poured over packed vegetables in sealed ceramic jars as a long-term preservation medium. Fermentation researchers studying Shanxi aged vinegar in controlled trials found antimicrobial activity against a range of food spoilage organisms, activity that significantly exceeded what the acidity level alone would predict. The extra compounds from the aging process were doing additional work. 12 years of fermentation produced a preservative more complex than anything you could manufacture in a day. Why were these banned? Here is the honest answer. Most of these methods were not banned out of malice. They were flagged, restricted, and regulated during the mid-20th century, when food safety science was moving rapidly towards standardization and centralized production. The logic was understandable. Industrial food systems needed consistent, measurable, controllable processes. An unglazed clay jar, buried in someone's backyard, does not fit neatly into a food safety inspection checklist. The problem was that the science being applied was incomplete. Testing done in the 1950s and 1960s evaluated these methods against pathogens in controlled laboratory conditions, without accounting for the specific microbial ecology of traditional fermentation environments. It is like testing a rainforest ecosystem by removing all the trees first, and then concluding that the soil is infertile. The context was the point, and the context was removed. There was also a cultural dimension that food scientists are only recently acknowledging openly. Methods from non-Western traditions were systematically held to higher burdens of proof than equivalent Western preservation practices, some of which, if evaluated by the same standards, would not have fared particularly well either. What scientists are now saying is that the shift has been real and significant. Fermentation science, gut microbiome research, and food system sustainability studies have converged on conclusions that traditional Chinese food preservation practitioners would find deeply unsurprising. Living fermented foods produced through traditional methods in appropriate vessels consistently demonstrate greater microbial diversity and more complex beneficial compound profiles than their industrially produced equivalents. The specific environments created by clay, ash, smoke, and aged wine are not random. They select for microbial communities that are extraordinarily effective at both preserving food and producing compounds beneficial to human health. Research published through institutions including Harvard, the University of Copenhagen, and several Chinese agricultural universities between 2015 and 2023 has collectively begun to rehabilitate methods that were dismissed for decades. The language in these papers is careful, academic, measured, but read enough of them and the underlying message is consistent. These ancient practices worked. They worked for reasons that traditional practitioners could not have articulated in scientific terms, but understood implicitly through generations of observation and refinement. What is perhaps most striking is the sustainability dimension. Every single method in this list requires no electricity, no refrigeration infrastructure, and no manufactured inputs beyond salt and time. At a moment when the global food system is under pressure from energy costs, climate disruption, and supply chain fragility, traditional Chinese food preservation methods represent something genuinely valuable. Not as a curiosity or a nostalgia exercise, but as practical, applicable, tested technology. So here is where we land. 25 methods, thousands of years of refinement, a few decades of official skepticism, and now a growing body of scientific research quietly confirming what grandmothers in Sichuan, Fujian, Hunan, and Zhejiang never stopped knowing. The filing cabinet full of regulations is real, but so is the research reversing it. I am Mike. This is Asian Lifestyle, and honestly, making this video made me want to go dig a hole in my backyard and bury some eggs in ash, which is either a sign that I have learned something today or a sign that I need to get out more. Probably both. If this changed how you think about food, about preservation, about what we dismiss too quickly in the name of progress, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper, the next video is waiting. It covers the ancient Chinese food methods that survived not just centuries, but entire civilizations. Some of those methods are still practiced right now in kitchens that look exactly as they did 1,000 years ago. The old knowledge did not disappear. It simply waited for science to catch up.